The 20th century, what an age of explosive change. It gave us some incredible wonders for sure, but it also, in many ways, broke the world. So today, we're going to dig into how that very rupture tore right through English literature and split it clean in two. So this slide really gets to the heart of the paradox of the 20th century. On the one hand, you've got this unbelievable progress, the airplane, the motor car, this whole new era of freedom and mobility. But then, on the other hand, as historian A.C. Ward puts it, you have this massive moral and spiritual relapse. I mean, think about it. The very same scientific engine that gave us the thrill of the open road also gave us the tools for mass slaughter on a scale nobody had ever imagined. And according to Ward, this wasn't some kind of cosmic coincidence. This double-edged sword, all the progress and all the regress, it all grew from the exact same root, the scientific revolution, that pretty much defined the entire age. Okay, so to really get a handle on the earthquake, you first have to understand the world that it completely shattered. So let's take a step back into what seemed like the incredibly solid world of the Victorians. You have to picture it. The Victorians, they lived with this deep, profound sense of stability. They saw their world as this house built on unshakable foundations: family, empire, religion, authority. Now, these weren't just abstract ideas. They were seen as permanent, rock-solid fixtures of life. And the voice of an expert or an authority figure, well, that was rarely, if ever, questioned.
But, of course, not everyone saw this stability as a strength. You had thinkers like George Bernard Shaw, who looked at all this and just saw stagnation. This quote from his play Major Barbara is like a trumpet call, just blasting a society that was happy to scrap its old machines, but absolutely refused to scrap its old, worn-out prejudices and moralities.
But for a lot of people, this attack on tradition didn't feel liberating at all. It was absolutely terrifying. It felt, just as another character in that same play puts it, as if the very rock you thought was eternal was suddenly, without warning, just crumbling away right under your feet. And right here, this is the crucial turning point. That old Victorian instinct to just accept and affirm things gets totally swept away by a new, restless creed. And you can sum it up in 3 words: question, examine, test. This new habit of interrogating everything started to spread like wildfire through every single corner of society. All right, so with this new questioning spirit in the air, let's see how it plays out in the world of literature. Because this is where it's going to lead to a really dramatic and, honestly, a lasting split. And wow, this timeline just lays it all out, doesn't it? Before 1922, you had what was called the Age of the Common Reader. You had major authors like Shaw and H.G. Wells, and they were writing for a broad, general public. But 1922, that was the turning point. 2 monumental and, let's face it, really difficult works are published: James Joyce's Ulysses and T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. And with them, literature takes this sharp turn and retreats into what the historian Ward calls an esoteric fastness. So what does esoteric even mean? Well, basically, this new literature was deliberately complex. It was dense. It wasn't written for the average person. It was almost like a private language for a small intellectual elite, for people who had the specialized knowledge to decode it. And what this did was create this huge, profound wall between the artists and the public. And you might think the creators of this new art would be a little apologetic, but no way. They fiercely defended their retreat. In this quote, T.S. Eliot just flips the whole argument on its head. He's claiming that separating literature from common, everyday life isn't elitist. He argues that trying to dumb it down for a mass audience, that's the real principle of disorder. And look, this attitude, it wasn't subtle at all. The contempt was often right there on the surface. Just look at this praise for James Joyce. He's being celebrated for refusing to betray his intellect to the hydra-headed rabble of the mental underworld. I mean, wow. Intellectual aloofness was suddenly being framed as a high virtue. Okay, so let's pull the camera back out now and see how these cultural shifts, this loss of certainty, this splintering of art, how it all played out across the wider society, especially in the years after the Second World War. And this brings us to another one of the great paradoxes of the century. The post-war era, it sees the birth of the welfare state, right? And this creates an affluent society with material security like never before. People had more stuff, but they weren't happier. In fact, this new security was often paired with a new kind of spiritual emptiness, a strange kind of sullen discontent. You know, that old ideal of the quirky, independent, common man, the kind of character celebrated in the early novels of H.G. Wells, well, that gave way to a totally new reality, mass man. And in this new system, the individual was often treated less like a unique person and more like, well, like a punched card in some vast, impersonal administrative machine. And you could see the symptoms of this disconnect popping up all over the place. Consumerism just exploded into this pressure of keeping up with the Joneses. The pride of craftsmanship, it basically died on the repetitive assembly line. And then in this really perplexing twist, crime actually flourished even as the economic stress of poverty was declining. It was like society was losing its sense of purpose, its connection to itself. So what was the end result of all this century-long upheaval, from questioning Victorianism all the way to the rise of mass man? Well, according to Ward's analysis, it all boiled down to one thing: a widespread culture of contempt. Now, this wasn't just kids being rebellious. It was something much deeper. It was a deep-seated contempt for traditional standards, for manners, for authority in all its forms. That healthy habit of questioning everything had kind of soured into a default habit of just dismissing everything. And you can see this culture of contempt everywhere you look. You see it in the rise of the beatniks, who literally tried to contract out of society altogether. You see it as satire degraded from something sharp and witty into what Ward calls a witless industry of just simple mockery. And you see it as that old Victorian reticence gave way to a media-driven passion for exhibitionism. And what was really being lost here was a kind of shared understanding. This quote, again from Bernard Shaw of all people, is just a stark reminder. Good manners, social restraint, they aren't just polite suggestions. They are the essential glue that makes human society tolerable, and maybe even possible in the first place. So we're left with the central question of this entire great unraveling, aren't we? In that necessary and, let's be honest, exciting rush to tear down the old world's prejudices, did we stop to really consider what we were losing in the process? What was the true cost of it all?